The Whitney Reynolds Show is made possible by Kevin Kelly with App Properties.
Hi, I'm Whitney Reynolds, and coming up on today's show, our topic is no limits. Despite their circumstances, today's guests have decided to press on. We have an internationally known musician, a 17-year-old who's working with lawmakers, and an artist who is legally blind. They have chosen to triumph rather than be overcome with tragedy.
I'm an artist, and I'm visually impaired.
I had a virus that went to my spinal cord.
And my father died.
I was mugged.
I was diagnosed with mononucleosis.
You're watching The Whitney Reynolds Show.
Well, our first guest says his disability has helped him see beyond the canvas. Let's welcome David Simpson to the show. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We are talking about no limits, despite the circumstance, people pressing on. Now, you are legally blind.
Yes.
And you're an artist.
I know, amazing.
How does this work out, David?
I just have to work within the limits that I have. And usually it means sticking my nose into my work.
Well, I want to talk about your younger days. You weren't born blind.
No.
In fact, it wasn't until 2000 that you were legally...
Yes, I was working in a factory and I became legally blind. Well, I didn't know it. I was walking down the street one day, actually walking towards a train, and a train door opened. I saw the train, I saw a train door open, and I went to the door and I ran right into a pole and a garbage can. Didn't know what was going on. It's macular degeneration, retinal scarring, and I just found out that it's like holes in my vision.
When you were growing up, did you always have the love for arts?
Oh yeah, I was always like drawing little pictures everywhere. I mean, in pictures, on everything. I was drawing cities, I was drawing maps, I was drawing flags, flowers, and things like that. Just fashion.
So you always had a love for the arts,
Yeah.
but you weren't doing that full time.
No, I was just a kid for the most part.
When they did pinpoint it, what emotion did you feel?
I got kind of depressed. I got depressed and kind of worried and kind of weepy and cry for the first week. And then the next month was done out of like anger, kind of. I got angry about things like walking down the street. All these things were starting to be taken away from me. And I got really depressed. I used to ride my bike on my own, great distances, driving, all the things that a great American loves to have, their access to mobility and stuff like that was taken away, and walking down the street, and my job. So all of those were in threat and in flux, and everything's being thrown into question. And then the one thing I love doing is seeing, it's being taken away from me. So it was depressing. I remember just looking out the window one day saying, I'm just being closed off. It's so closed off. And that's when I sort of like turned to art as not so much as an escape, but as a release valve to help me figure out a map of which way to go. I gotta say, it's like, it's sort of like a map. It helps me negotiate my internal geography.
One thing I've noticed is when I was looking at your artwork before the year 2000 and then after the year 2000, I noticed more of almost like you create more of an open, almost like it's interesting because I feel like you're saying that you were feeling at that point really closed in, but I noticed that your artwork almost looks opened up, like a window to the world.
It was sort of these pieces that came to me. What I was feeling like I was tripping on everything, starting to trip on, whatever was going on. And I just needed a place to feel an expanse. And I sort of went to the surrealist paintings, those large expanses that they use in there. And I went to those because I felt like it's like running on a beach. You're not going to run into a lot of stuff on the beach. And so I opened up, and then I had these windows, and I was looking out a window, and I just sort of put down a window in my piece. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to realize that this is kind of making me feel a lot better, too. and
Amazing.
and I'm feeling like I actually it was the size of the piece and the that kept it in control, but yet through that control, like highly controlled and like looking at it real close, I was able to like go internally, go into the picture and start feeling expanse. And that was sort of like how I was starting to feel inside. Like I'm just so grateful I have art to like sort of bounce back to.
Thanks, David, for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Guys, sometimes obstacles don't have to be physical. They can also be mental. Let's take a look at this week's Social Sizzle. It is now time for the Social Sizzle, where we ask Facebook and Twitter a question about our topic. We asked how many people let fear hold them back from living the life of their dreams, and 22% said that fear has impacted their dreams. I am joined by Brian Kaczynski, who is a BMX rider. Now, for people that don't know about BMX, give a brief summary.
Yeah, so a BMX rider, the kind of riding I do is done on a bicycle, a 20-inch bicycle, so kind of like a trick bike, you could say, and you basically do tricks, and it's a freestyle sort of thing. So you do tricks of your preference, and you can do it on anything, whether it be ramps or dirt or street or staircases, any of that stuff. So the kind of riding that I do is called street riding. So it's taking a BMX bike and riding it out in the terrain that you see around the city. Whether that be handrails or staircases or ledges. Whatever you find. So it's really fun.
Now, this is your profession, but you didn't get here overnight. In fact, you were actually afraid of riding back in the day.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I started riding BMX with a group of friends. We were real young, we were 11, 12 years old, and they were all pretty much risk takers. We had these bikes and they were built for doing tricks and stuff like that, and so they would just fly off a ramp or bomb down a hill or whatever, and I would kind of be the one in the back saying like, I don't know if I should do this. I was a chicken. I was totally scared of everything, and that's where where I kind of was able to push myself and get over one fear at a time, and here I am today. So
what is your advice for someone at home that is holding back from their dreams or holding back from maybe a goal they have because they can't push past that fear?
My suggestion would actually, I'll relate it to exercise. So, you go to the gym. If you go to the gym one day, one time, you're not going to achieve any results really. Yeah, you'll feel good that day, but you're not going to really achieve, it's that you need to do one thing every single day. You need to really work at it every single day. And that's what I would say would be my suggestion for fear too. Overcome one fear every day, like just reach past your comfort zone in one way every single day, and then before you know it, you'll just see yourself grow. And so I think that's the key. Don't expect to just be fearless and have a completely different life overnight. It's not going to work like that. It's just do one little thing a day, and before you know it, you'll see massive changes.
Were you ever worried about the next step of fear? Like what's the next thing I'm going to have to conquer?
I don't think. I think there's all these, different little fears, but I think I've realized that a lot of them were just stupid, irrational little things, and not, no fear is stupid. I mean, obviously you have it for a reason, but I've just come to realize that there really isn't anything you can't overcome, and I'm sure that I'll wake up tomorrow with some new small little fear that I'll have to battle, and so. Yeah, it's one of those things that, again, I'll take my own advice constantly, or I'll just have to push myself, and it might not even be something that's bike related. Like, sure, I'm tomorrow or today even I'll want to learn a new trick or something, for example. But there'll be all these other challenges that life brings about, and you just have to take them, one step at a time and overcome them, and before you know it, you're happier. You're just living a better life, I think.
Well, I love your advice for everyone, weighing out the fears, writing it down, thinking of a new one each day. And this is a Social Sizzle, and we did ask that question, and 22% said that fear does stop them. And I almost think that it would be harder to live with regret than fear. And you actually put out on social media quotes quite often. And you told me a quote before we started taping. What was that quote?
Yeah, there's a quote by Les Brown, and he just said, the only thing holding us back from living our dreams is because we're living our fears. And I think that that's true. I mean, there's a lot of things that people, I would really love to do this. It would be my dream to do this, but,
Right.
And I think, again, you just need to have just rational fear and just try to get over those things one step at a time.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with the world of how conquering your fear has led you to your dream job. Thanks, Brian.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, our next guest is an athlete as well. By overcoming her obstacles, it opened the door for many other athletes in her situation. Let's welcome Mary Kate Callahan to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Your story is incredible. At 5.5 months, tell us what was going on.
At 5.5 months old, I had a virus that went to my spinal cord and left me paralyzed from the waist down. And from as young as I can remember, I really never thought of myself as different. I really thought I was like every other kid out there.
Do you think that was because of the way your parents raised you, or is that because it was so young when it happened to you?
I think it's a combination of both. My parents raised me to be as independent as possible. I had an older brother growing up, so it was really that he was doing sports and everything. But I felt comfortable with who I was, and I think that really helped other people feel comfortable around me and treat me like they would anyone else.
So you've always been an athlete. What sports have you participated in?
I've competed in so many sports: wheelchair tennis, wheelchair basketball, track, field, swimming, and my most current sport is really triathlon. You
really took a liking to swimming. Tell us about that.
Swimming was always a sport that really stood out. When I'm in the water, I feel so free. I'm not bound to my chair. I don't require any additional equipment, and I'm just like everyone else in the water. I swim right next to able-bodied people, and people don't see me different in the pool either.
So swimming on the high school level, you realized that there was not fair rules?
So going into high school, I knew I wanted to swim on the swim team. That kind of was the reason I went to Fenwick. The coaches were great. They included me in everything. I swam in meets. I was in practice with all of them. Morning practice, afternoon practice, the doubles that everyone talks about for swimming. But there was a certain point in the season where I was really being cut off, and so were all the other disabled swimmers. The Illinois High School Sports Association didn't have a policy set up or a standard set up to include athletes with disabilities in their state championship meets. And talking to my friends from around the country, they had these opportunities, and there was really no reason that we shouldn't have been able to compete with them. So my freshman year was the first time we got in contact with them, and it was kind of a really slow-moving process. And by the time my junior year rolled around, I was like, wow, I have one more high school season left. Like, I want to be able to swim at state, but I also want all the kids coming behind me to have this opportunity that they don't have to fight for.
And this was special to Illinois, and not other, like you were saying, other people from across the country could participate.
Right. There was 21 other states that had policies adopted or standards adopted. So it wasn't like Illinois was the first. So I just didn't want other kids to feel like they were being pushed to the sidelines because of their disability, because obviously we're not able to control what disability we have. But we do have this ability in swimming or in track and field, and we want to showcase this to everyone else and show that athletes with disabilities really are athletes.
So what kind of action did you take?
January of 2012, we met with the IHSA and just had a meeting with the Fenwick administrators and the board of directors at the IHSA, and it sounded really positive. And several meetings and proposals later, nothing was really happening. And so myself, the Attorney General, and Equip for Equality filed a lawsuit against the Illinois High School Sports Association for them really not including people with disabilities in their events.
The question is, did you get to compete?
I did. This past November, me and 7 other swimmers dove in the water for the first time in Illinois history at the state championship, and replaying that memory in my head is really remarkable. I remember finishing my first event, looking up in the crowd and seeing this pool, like all the fans in the pool, like standing, applauding for us, because we really were true athletes and we weren't being thought of with athletes with a disability.
How did that feel? Like, if you had to put kind of one word with it, what would you say?
Priceless.
Oh. And you really had an uphill battle with it.
It didn't come easy. I mean, as a 17-year-old, you don't really think that you're going to be named as a plaintiff in a lawsuit. But it was something that I felt so strong about. And to hear from these kids that are so much younger than me saying thank you for this opportunity, or like the boys who just had their state championship, they were like, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So it's just something that needed to be done, and it was done.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you.
We wanted to hear what you guys at home had to say, so we took it to the streets. How did you overcome the obstacles and what got you through it? Let's take a look.
People told me that there was nothing wrong with me. They told me I was lazy, they told me I was crazy, they told me I was depressed, they told me I was this. It took me many, many years. It turned out I actually had some bleeding in my occipital lobe in my brain, and that there was actually some brain damage which had damaged my, the nerves that control your eyes, visual accommodation, that sort of thing. And what got me through it was just relentless unwillingness to quit. I knew that I wasn't lazy, and I knew after a few years at least that I wasn't crazy.
About 5 years ago, I started noticing some numbness in my hands and my legs a little bit, and as it turned out, I'd broken my neck, and I had to go in and have steel plate put in around my neck and a rod put in through the neck up and down from C1 through C5 or 6, and now I'm back and working out and doing fine thanks to a few good friends and people who knew more than I did and were smart enough to do something about it.
I was mugged by 2 men, and it was very stressful, but with the support of my friends and family and taking up yoga, I learned to chill and live in the moment.
The obstacle that I overcame, it was when I was 14 years old and my father died. And the thing about it is when you're 14 and your father dies, you think your world is over. However, in hindsight, you realize that your life is just beginning. And so I was engaged in a lot of extracurriculars. I had a great support system with friends. Basketball, golf, tennis, and chess were things I was involved in. And it's really these things that he introduced me to. And so using all that negative energy and turning it into positive energy, negative memories turn into positive memories. And so it's those things that what kept me moving forward. It's what helped me get over that, to understand that life is life and to accept the fact of death. And really 12 years later, I'm a stronger person because of it.
The major obstacle that I'll talk about is my bout with drugs and alcohol. So I've been clean and sober since 1990, but it was going through that process and the reality of actually accepting the fact that I was an addict and then having to go through that process of recovery, which I'm still doing to this day, because the old saying, take it a day at a time. And I found that through yoga and meditation and exercise and surrounding myself with people who cared about me, that I'm able to go forward on a daily basis.
We're stuck in a house that was really noisy. It was next to a music venue, and we had 2 little children and another one on the way, and it was just really hard, and we sort of didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel because we couldn't sell it. So we ended up, really having to buckle down and figure out a way out of the situation, and we had to be creative a little bit and think outside the box. And we ended up in a great home that really fits our family, and there were some dark moments, but we came out the other end, and I think we just learned to keep the big picture in mind. We were all still together. It seemed like a horrible thing, but really we all had each other and our health, and everything was okay.
Well, our next guest is an internationally well-known artist, and her music is inspirational, and so is her story. Let's take a look.
Rachel Barton Pine started playing the violin at a very young age. She currently tours worldwide as a soloist with prestigious orchestras, plays in a Baroque chamber music group, a heavy metal band, and has an active recording career. In 1995, Rachel was in an accident where she suffered some major injuries. However, she did not let this stop her career. She is a true example of no limits.
Rachel, thanks for coming on the show and having us in your home.
Well, thanks for coming over. It gave me a good excuse to clean my apartment.
Well, and it is actually soundproof in here.
Exactly. So every day I'm home, which is actually fewer than half of them. This is where I practice, frequently at 3 in the morning.
You didn't get to this spot overnight. In fact, your childhood and even your teen years, everything kind of led you to this point and getting to the point where you're internationally known musician as well. But let's talk about 1995, you had a train accident, but you wouldn't say that was your biggest limit that you've ever faced?
Definitely not. Yeah, my childhood was actually filled with challenges because my father was unemployed during most of my student years, and my mom was taking care of me and my younger sisters, and so we were frequently one missed payment away from losing the roof over our heads. The phone and electricity would be cut off all the time, and sometimes we couldn't even figure out how the heck are we going to pay for groceries this week and fill the tank with gas to drive to the violin lessons. So the idea of trying to pursue music in the face of those struggles was almost crazy, but I just really believed that the talent that God gave me is what I was meant to share with the world, and this is what I was meant to do with my life. And so I just held on to that faith that somehow things would work out even though I couldn't really see how. And indeed they did.
How did you afford your first violin?
Well, that was how my parents got tricked into letting me start. Because when I was 3, I saw some middle school age girls playing violin in my church, and they had on the most beautiful long dresses, and I loved the sound of the violin, and so I said I wanted a violin. But my parents didn't really take me seriously at first. Luckily, there was a teacher in the neighborhood just a few blocks down the street. And so, that summer they said, okay, I guess you can try it out. And some of our neighbors were also taking lessons, and they told my parents, violins are so cheap, you can just rent a little tiny one at the local shop, and, it's much cheaper than buying a piano. Little did we know that when you get to professional quality violins, pianos are a heck of a lot less expensive. But to start off with, the violin, we just rented one, and it all worked out.
Wow, so you were talking about your childhood and how it was a struggle. Did you contribute to the family at a young age?
Well, not when I was super young, but by the time I was 14, luckily I had gotten skilled enough on the violin that I was able to start doing not only the solo concerts that I was pursuing artistically, but also like freelance gigs, playing background music at parties or playing in a string quartet for weddings, subbing in local orchestras, stuff like that.
At 14 years old?
Yeah, well, it was better than babysitting.
Yeah.
I mean, I like children, but it was more fun to take my violin and go do these things. And, now that I am a soloist and traveling to a different city or country every week and living this glamorous life, I never forget that my roots are here in Chicago as a working musician, and, that I did help to support my family during my teen years that way. And I feel like it gave me a lot of insights, both musically into what the orchestra is all about when I then go and solo with orchestras, but also just, what it's like to live the life of a working musician.
But you're really saying there's no limits. Work hard and you'll get there.
Well, you can usually get scholarships, like the kind of financial aid at the music school where you're studying that helps to pay for your lessons, but there are so many other costs that go into pursuing a life as a musician. When you're a student, you have to pay out of your own pocket for sheet music purchase, piano accompanist fees, airfare to competitions, audition recording sessions, new strings for your violin, even like concert clothes. My mom would go to the thrift store and get these like out of fashion old bridesmaids dresses and fix them up for stage. And but there are many generous individuals who helped me along the way, and I've been very, very blessed to have the opportunity to start a foundation with my husband that helps young artists coming up, and it's a great way to honor those who helped me.
So you're passing on the legacy.
Absolutely.
That is wonderful. And speaking of the legacy, you have a daughter.
Yes.
Yeah, and you actually just came out with a new CD, Lullabies. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my daughter was born a year and a half ago. She started touring with me when she was 3 weeks old. So she's a very well-traveled baby.
I would say so, because you're everywhere.
Well, different city or country every week. So she goes to the airport like every few days, and I think she thinks that's how all babies live. She's very chill about it. But yeah, I wanted to be able to share some violin music with little Sylvia. And I realized, when I'm holding her and nursing her, like I only have 2 arms. And, I don't have any arms left to serenade her. So I thought I would play some lullabies on the violin and, play them back for her on recording. So I started collecting them, and I ended up collecting more than 150 from libraries around the world. And there were so many gorgeous ones that I realized this has to be a real CD for everyone to get to hear. And so that's how Violin Lullabies came to exist.
How did you narrow it down?
Oh my gosh, that was so difficult.
I imagine.
I thought, I'll pick the 25 best and put those on the album, but there were many more than 25 that were the best. Wow. So I finally was like, okay, whichever ones I seem to, be my favorite to this day, that's going to be the ones that win.
Well, advice for anybody at home watching that maybe feels like they've hit their limit.
Well, I mean, it's really just a matter of faith because, we have to do all we can. And I think, talent can get you so far, but hard work is what it's all about. Hard work and taking advantage of opportunities. But then there's that last piece, which is, I don't know how this is going to work.
Right.
And so just having that trust that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm doing it as well as I can, and life is going to work itself out somehow. Somehow, if you do have that belief, it does.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, we all have our own story and our own challenges. I hope today has given you a unique perspective on prevailing against all odds. For more information on today's show, go to thewhitneyreynolds.com. Special thanks to STI Movers, Design Within Reach, ECTV, and the Gorilla Tango Theater. The Whitney Reynolds Show is made possible by Kevin Kelly with App Properties.